While SpaceX is rapidly innovating with its Starship and needs to test it extensively by sending it to orbit and have many fans rooting for it, not everybody welcomes the idea. The only arbiter in the tussle of allowing SpaceX to send its Starship to orbit for the first time is the Federal Aviation Administrator, FAA. Join us as we examine what the FAA just did with SpaceX and why it changes everything. The Starship requires rigorous testing because of the sensitivity of its purpose. The hope of a whole nation rests on it because NASA will use it to resume sending American astronauts to the moon. At the cost of $2.9 billion, the Starship will carry out the crucial step of dropping astronauts on the surface of the moon. The trip is going to be historic because it will achieve many firsts. It's the first time a female astronaut will walk on the moon. It's also the first time an African American will step on the moon. That's not the end of NASA's use for the Starship, as the Project Artemis is a stepping stone to Mars. If the Starship delivers on this moon mission, NASA will use it to put its astronauts on the Red Planet. This NASA's plan for Mars is different from Elon Musk's own dream of colonizing the planet. He even set up Starlink for fast satellite internet to raise money for this burning desire of his. His dream is to send millions of explorers to Mars to live there permanently. That's not a small undertaking, as he reckons he needs to move 1 million people from Earth to Mars for his permanent occupation to be feasible. This requires transporting both cargo and people over vast distances in space. Musk needs to move much equipment, like nuclear micro-reactors for producing electricity and other machinery required to keep people alive. Musk's ambitious scheme requires a powerful rocket, and that is what the Starship is. In fact, it's the most powerful spaceship ever built by man. Its proportions are immense, with a total height of 120 meters and a diameter of 9 meters. This beast of a rocket can lift more than 100 tons to low Earth orbit with the help of about 35 Raptor rockets that each produces 2 mn of thrust. SpaceX is building them in-house using a full-flow, staged design. Designing the most powerful rocket is one thing, and it's another thing to design a reusable rocket. Despite the complexity, SpaceX is doing both with the Starship. While its existing rockets are partially reusable, the Starship is fully reusable at both stages. It might look impossible, but that is what Musk is aiming for. He wants the lower stage to launch several missions in a day, with a turnaround time of 30 minutes between launches. This reusability is important for Musk, because that's one of the ways he wants to reduce the cost associated with space travel. He wants people to be able to fund their relocation to Mars with money from selling their homes and still have enough money to start a new life there. Because of the complexities and great expectations, SpaceX has to test the Starship before putting it into action thoroughly. It can't afford to fail. SpaceX has carried out dozens of tests on the Starship. After several prototypes that have crashed and burned, SpaceX got landing the Starship right with the SN-15 prototype. The company has even stacked the 2 stages together to assemble the tallest ever rocket, although it quickly separated them for more work. However, all the tests SpaceX have done have been suborbital. It needs to send the Starship to orbit to test some crucial components and features. One such component is the heat shield. At the speed with which the Starship will re-enter the atmosphere, lots of heat will be generated. And to protect the spacecraft, SpaceX is adding heat-resistant ceramic tiles to the surface of the Starship that will bear the heat. SpaceX just has to send a prototype to space to test the solutions it has worked on. This is where FAA comes in, because the Starship is not going anywhere without FAA's approval. The FAA is the regulator of all the nation's civil aviation activities, including managing air traffic in the U.S. airspace. Part of its job is regulating the U.S. commercial space transportation industry. The agency licenses commercial space launch facilities and private launches of space payloads. Before SpaceX gets the license it needs to blast the Starship to space, the FAA will perform an environmental assessment of SpaceX's facilities and operations in Boca Chica, Texas. The FAA basically wants SpaceX to demonstrate it has taken all necessary safety precautions to ensure the minimal risk in case anything goes wrong during the launch attempt. In connection with this, the FAA conducted 2 hearings to get feedback from members of the public on the process. Due to COVID restrictions, both hearings were held virtually. These meetings gave the public opportunity to voice their feelings on the operation of SpaceX, which has dramatically expanded its Starbase facilities in the area since it began to test the Starship in 2019 rapidly. Since all opinions were welcome and didn't have to be technical, the participants didn't hold back. Musk tried to use Twitter to rally his fans to show support at the hearings, as they could sway FAA's decision. To drive his point home, Musk mentioned that humanity's future on the Moon, Mars, and beyond depends on the hearing outcome. This came after Musk had criticized the regulatory system as broken in the past. In its proposal, SpaceX has proposed up to 20 suborbital launches per year and up to 5 orbital launches per year. This is the 4th stage out of 8 in its review process. A total of 120 speakers showed up, and SpaceX's opposers got to bare their minds publicly. One of such was Joyce Hamilton, who doesn't live in Boca Chica but claims to be a frequent visitor there. According to her, expanded activities at Starbase could negatively impact the fragile and unique coastline, which bothered her greatly. She also felt bad about how the locals have lost access to nearby beaches on a regular basis. In the end, she urged the FAA to conduct a serious, comprehensive environmental impact study. Another speaker, Rebecca Hinojosa, who lives about 20 miles from Starbase, opposed SpaceX's activities in the area. After complaining about the agency's incompetence for failing to provide review updates in Spanish, she mentioned how SpaceX has been responsible for destroying the community, gentrification, and displacement of Boca Chica's residents. However, these loud opposers were in the minority, as most speakers supported SpaceX. Nicholas Andrich, California resident but a frequent visitor to Boca Chica, just like Hamilton, shares Musk's aspiration to putting people on Mars, calling Boca Chica the place where Starship will innovate the world. He urged people to ignore the minor issues for the sake of the greater good. Brandon Mchugh declared he supported SpaceX all through, as their activities are absolutely necessary and vital to humanity as a species. SpaceX can count on the support of Brownsville City Commissioner Jessica Tetreault, who spoke last. She begged the FAA to grant SpaceX the license, noting that the company employs more than 2,000 in the region. The FAA will collect public inputs until November 1st and then evaluate all the comments in its draft's assessment, including them in its final evaluation. The agency can issue a FONSI, or finding of no significant impact, or if things do not go in the way of SpaceX, decide to begin a more in-depth review, which is known as an environmental impact statement. This will further delay SpaceX's orbital launch. However, while the FAA considers the issues raised during the meetings with launches, it can issue a temporary license for testing. This delay has not stopped SpaceX from working on its Starship. Musk said on Twitter that the Starship 20 prototype would be ready for orbital flight in November, regardless of what the FAA does. He also mentioned that SpaceX was working on improving the Raptor engine. They're trying to upgrade it from 270 bar to above 300 bar chamber pressure. Tell us what you think of the FAA's lengthy review of SpaceX's permit in the comments section.